Honorable Representative Tregenza. He's not in office right now, but anybody that's ever held office, you always call them whatever their highest rank was. So, yes, the War of 1812. Does anyone here know the other name that we call the War of 1812? Anybody? Yes. No.
No, wait.
Who did we fight in the War of 1812?
I don't know.
Oh, isn't it?
I'm looking at that.
Okay, we fought who in the War of 1812?
British.
The British. And was it the first or second time we fought them? The second. So the first war was called the War of Independence, so this was called the...
Revolutionary War? No.
But this war in 1812 was called the Second War of Independence. Very good. Now, actually it was part of a world war. There was a world war going on this time, which was also called the War of 1812. France was at war. Napoleon was at war with a lot of all the other powers in Europe. He was running loose all over the place. And this Russian composer by the name of Tchaikovsky, very, very good. I like when people know this stuff. He wrote a piece called what?
The 1812 Overture.
Overture, yes. And what is interesting about this symphonic piece in terms of the percussion instruments at the end? Does anybody know what kind of percussion instruments are used at the end of this piece? Yes. Canon. It's the only musical work that you have canon, meaning percussion instruments at the end of it. And if anybody ever gets a chance to see the fireworks in Boston, down by the river for free, we shoot off about $5 million. That's 5 million. And we shoot off the cannon and play this great song by Tchaikovsky. Was Tchaikovsky concerned about what was going on in America? No, not really. He was concerned about Napoleon invading Russia, but we still like that piece. So, has anyone ever heard of the author F. Scott Fitzgerald?
Yes.
Yes. What did he write? What did F. Scott Fitzgerald write? Famous book.
The Great Gatsby.
The Great Gatsby. Very good. It's from the Jazz Age. It actually recounts a lot of the sins of the Jazz Age. People actually drank gin made in a bathtub, stuff like that. And yeah, so it's sort of like The Great Gatsby is kind of a morality tale of what not to do in life. And but he's very famous. And the end of the book said talked about America, and it said, "And so we beat on boats against the current, borne back ceaselessly into the past." So we're people of the restless future. That's why we can have 5,000 years of progress in 200 years. It's pretty amazing to go from a horse and buggy to a man on the moon in that short a time. Fitzgerald knew it, and so F. Scott. Does anybody go by their middle name here? Anybody go by their middle name? No. Anybody ever use their middle name?
To write a signature.
Yeah. Well, Fitzgerald didn't go by his first name. He went by Scott because his first name was rather unfortunate. It was Francis. And, you know, if you're a guy, especially around 8th grade, Francis, you know, it's just not too popular. So he went by Scott. Probably a good decision. Now, he had another middle name. It's kind of interesting. And if you asked his mom why he was a great writer, she'd say, yeah, I knew he was a great writer the day he was born. I named him. And so he had this second middle name, which was really funny. Really funny. Why? Why Key? Why would somebody name their kid Key? Yeah. What was his first name? What was his middle name? What was his other middle name? Does those names ring a bell? Yeah. He wrote the Star-Spangled Banner. That's right. Very good. So, F. Scott Fitzgerald, that wrote The Great Gatsby, was a descendant of Francis Scott Key. And he never let anybody know that because he wanted to be famous on his own. But yeah, if you asked his mom, he'd say, of course he's a good writer. Their ancestor wrote a poem that everybody knows and sings. So, anyway, so we're here on an anniversary. We're here on a bicentennial. Does anybody know how long a bicentennial is? Yes. 2 years? No, Haley.
200 years.
200 years, very good. 200 years ago, we were fighting this war. It actually was from 1812 to 1815. Tell you a little bit about anniversaries. So, 25 years is what? It's a quarter centennial. The word quarter, right? So, anybody know what happened 25 years ago in China? Tiananmen Square. Anybody know what happened 25 years ago in Berlin, Germany?
Berlin Wall.
The wall came down. That's a quarter centennial. Semi-centennial is how long?
10.
50, that's right. It's half of a centennial. It's 50 years. 50 years ago, we really, JFK was assassinated and we started to get into Vietnam in earnest. That's a very sad semi-centennial. A centennial is how long?
100 years.
100 years. What happened 100 years ago this month?
What day?
We're in July of 1914, 100 years ago.
Oh, beginning of World War I? Or?
World War I, July 30th, right. Okay, here's a really tough term, Dodracentennial.
That's 75 years.
Very good. There are professors at Harvard wouldn't know a Dodracentennial if it bit him in the backside. This guy knows what it is. What happened 75 years ago this September when Germany invaded Poland? That's right. So we are on the, say it? Dodracentennial of World War II. That's right. So bicentennial, sesquicentennial. Who knows what that is? That's one more you should know.
No.
50. 25.
150 years. Who knows what happened in America 150 years ago?
Revolutionary War.
That was the most devastating war in our history.
Civil War.
That's right. That's the sesquicentennial. Learn these, you're going to be tested on it. Maybe. At least I'll ask you one of them. So, all right. So these are the anniversaries. We're on the bicentennial. I remember when I was growing up, when Mr. Pike was growing up. Is he here?
Somewhere around here.
Okay, yeah. We had the bicentennial of the American Revolution, and that's when I learned that that song, the preamble song. They actually had it on TV. Maybe you've seen it on YouTube now. And they really taught us about our history. The adults at the time, it was really important to learn it. Now, no one has really said anything at all about this War of 1812, nothing. And so I'm glad I'm going to be able to teach you a little bit about it. So, does anybody, let's take a look at this flag. Does anybody notice anything different about it? Okay. Yes.
There are not 50 stars.
No. How many are there?
13.
15. Right. So as a result, the stars really pop out. It's kind of nice aesthetically. The stars get to be bigger and the blue field around them is bigger. And that's nice. Does anybody else notice any other
17
difference?
stripes.
Not quite that many.
Oh wait, not me. I mean, 18.
15. Very good. So you have 15 stars and 15 stripes. Now, who knows what the flag is called that has 13 stripes in a circle in it? I mean 13 stars in a circle. Pardon me. Yes. No, from the Revolutionary War. Who was the one that invented that flag? Betsy Ross. That's called a Betsy Ross. Okay. So this one was actually, the big one that flew over Fort McHenry was made by Mary Pickersgill, but they don't call it that. They call it something else. Does anybody know what they call this flag?
Betsy Ross flag.
Oh, say can you?
The
The Star Spangled Banner, because when the Star Spangled Banner was written, this was flying over the forge, and that's what people wanted to know. As long as that flag was flying, then America would still be there. If the flag was taken down, Washington had already been burned, Baltimore was our second largest city, you know, then it's or the land of the free, the home of the brave, that's the end of us. So that's how that song was written. And my notebook here. All right, so now this is called the hoist, little flag geography. Hoist. How do we raise the flag? How do we raise it? Yes.
With a pulley system?
Yeah, but how? In what manner? Briskly. The flag goes up briskly with alacrity, and then it's lowered ceremoniously. This is called the hoist. This is called the fly, because this is how it flies, like that. All right, now, what is this called, the Star with the Union? Emily Shirtliff. Where's Emily? Is she here?
She's in the Patriot.
All right, she knows this. I taught her. Who else knows what this is called?
The blue part with stars.
The part with the stars. Who knows? The Union. Very good, Mr. Hill. Yes. Why is it called that? Yes. Yeah.
Okay, wait, I think it's because it's...
No. When you raise your hand, have the answer, okay? Otherwise, let someone else that knows it raise their hand. Yes.
Everyone is like united as one, they're together.
That's right. Okay, where have we heard that term before? Union. Where have we heard the term union when we sing it and stuff?
Preamble.
The preamble, right. So the preamble says what the founders set out to do. So we the people
In order to
form a more perfect union. So that the union is it's the states together. It is the people united as Americans, as compatriots, all other Americans. It's very spiritual. It's the spirit of America. The president gives the State of the Union address. It is the territory. I got to travel across the grand majestic reaches of the Union, all across America last fall. It was a big thrill. Wow. Of a lifetime. So, now, so Union, so, well then, so what else, what does it say in the preamble? All the things we're going to do.
Establish justice and ensure peace. Oh, wait.
Okay, yes. Why are we going to establish justice and ensure domestic tranquility? They told us in the sentence
To
before.
provide for the country.
No, why? Why are we doing that?
For the people.
No, that's who's doing it. We the people are doing it. Why are we ensuring domestic tranquility? Why? In order to form a more perfect union. Why are we providing for the common defense? In order to form a more perfect union. Very, very good. So we're doing all of those things to form a better country, a better union among ourselves and the states. How are the states, or how, I should say, how were the states represented in our Constitution?
To the Senate.
The United States Senate, yes. How are we the people directly represented in the Congress?
To the House of Representatives.
Through the House of Representatives. Both of them comprise representation of the Union. Okay, very good. So now it's important to know why. I learned a lot of this stuff when I was a kid, but I didn't really learn the whys and wherefores. So why do we put our hand over our heart when we sing the national anthem or say the pledge? Who knows? That's tough.
Love our veterans.
We love our veterans. No.
Wait.
Yeah.
Me?
Yeah.
Well, because I know before we put our hand on our heart, we actually used to put our hand out like this, until the Nazis began to do that, and we saw that was not a good idea.
For the pledge, that's true. But for yes.
Stop our hearts from beating so fast.
That's good. Actually, this is where America lives. America lives in our hearts, just like God lives in our hearts, and so we reconnect with America when we do that as patriots. And Washington said, and hopefully you'll hear Pastor Lear is going to preach on this in his farewell address, that you can't have liberty without this thing called the Union. Without the American spirit, it will die. And I have to say, as a patriot, you know, in the liberty movement today, people are totally unaware of that, and it's really shameful. They should read Washington's farewell address. I can't wait to hear Pastor Lear on that one. So, definition of a patriot. Noah Webster, who was a patriot, by the way, said two things. What are the two things you got to do to be a patriot? Anybody?
Love your country and love God.
You got to love your country. You can be a patriot and not love God. And I mean, I wouldn't say so. I'm not that, but there's another thing you have to do. You have to love your country and fight for it. Yes. Okay, when is it okay to stop loving America or to stop fighting?
Never.
Never. Very good. Never. You go to the head of the class. I interviewed Bob. Anybody remember Bob Kingsbury? He was a World War II veteran. Yeah, he passed away unfortunately last fall. I interviewed him at his rest home in his uniform about a week before he died. He said, God bless you, he said, you know, Tom, it's always a fight. And he never gave up. He didn't. He was one of that generation. If you look in the Bible, Jeremiah, oh my goodness, the prophet, he was a great nationalist, a great patriot. He saw the problems, the corruption, the degradation, the demoralization. Did he give up? Did God say, okay, you're going to preach a little bit and then you're going to give up?
No.
No, he kept on preaching even after he went into captivity. He never gave up. And oh, by the way, the country was later reestablished. But so he's a good example to us. He cried out against it. And he told them what was going to happen to them, as did Isaiah, Daniel, Ezekiel. What prophet did give up for a little while and said, you know, it's not really worth it to preach to them people? He wound up in a whale. Jonah, yeah, Jonah. He said, God said, go preach to Nineveh. And Jonah thought to himself, those people are beyond help. And he went the other way. He got on a boat, and God caused a storm. And then he realized he better do what God said. He preached to Nineveh, and actually they were redeemed. They listened to him, believe it or not. So we are not to give up. We are to keep putting the message out of God and country in our Constitution. So, generational turning. Somebody studied this, generations in the Bible, and generations here. History doesn't move in a straight line like that. It moves in cycles. Cycles of, spring, when everything's growing, everything's going great. Summer, where we call that an awakening period. Fall is kind of an unraveling. And winter, where we have an extreme crisis. Can anybody guess where we might be now?
Winter.
Yes, we're heading for a crisis. We're almost through with an unraveling. We're heading for a crisis. So there are 4 generational archetypes in the Bible and in America. They're the artists. They come in the spring. The prophets during the awakening. The nomads during the unraveling. And then the heroes during the crisis. Do you guys know what you are?
The heroes.
You're the heroes. You're the heroes. When Mr. Shirtliff brought me down to Connecticut, we had like about 200 people your age, and I said, you guys, I'm really honored to be in your presence. 400? Wow, yeah. So we had 2 groups. We had 2 groups of 200. So, yeah. The crisis comes to a head, and this type of crisis, things are fought to the bitter end. In America, we've had 3 of these so far, in our Revolutionary War, in our Civil War, and World War II. And the heroes, really, the good thing is, people like us that have been preaching this stuff throughout the unraveling and before that, with little or no results, now, when you guys put out, as heroes, when you put out this message, people will listen. When they're in the midst of the crisis, what gets you through the crisis? The tried and true, family, God, country, right? So Americans will be open to this message for your generations much more than they have in the past. Because when you're in the midst of a crisis, you have to get through the crisis. Family, God, especially country, these are things that get us through the crisis. The other stuff just falls by the wayside, as it should. Okay. How are we doing? All right. So anyway, that's who you are. You have a great responsibility, but as I said, you are going to be listened to more than we were, and don't give up, Keep your concentration on the Bible, on the flag, on the Constitution. Hang tough. Hang tough. Do not give up. I'm going to get the story of that flag in particular is a story about not giving up in our young republic. So we were a young republic from 1790, right about when the Constitution came in, or was starting to come in, and to 1840 was the Second Great Awakening. Does anybody remember the First Great Awakening? I talked about it last year. Yeah, okay, so the First Great Awakening was before American independence. People really came to God very strongly. You had a lot of revivals, and then we decided, maybe we could do without a king. And it says in the second book of Samuel, God had not ordained earthly kings. He only ordained one king. Who's that?
Jesus.
That's right, Yeshua Jesus in the millennial kingdom. There's not supposed to be any other kings, and every other king that was corrupt in some way, even the good kings, like David, like Solomon. So we were in the Second Great Awakening, and they were camp meetings, right? And there were a lot of Baptists and Methodists and Presbyterians, and there were a lot of other new religions that started. The Mormons did. They're the ones out in Utah. Now there was a Sunday school movement, so children like you could learn about God. The Bible's tough when you're young. It's difficult, so they wanted to make sure there were Sunday schools. There was this guy named Stuttering Stephen. Stuttering Stephen, he stuttered. He couldn't get through a sentence, and he was lame. Kids made fun of him. But when you're a man of God, it doesn't matter. Before Stuttering Stephen was done, he founded 1,314 Sunday schools. Pastor, can I get an amen? Yeah. Stuttering Stephen, 1,314. 1,314 Sunday schools. Some of them are still in existence. Probably millions of kids came to God because of one guy, Stuttering Stephen. Another one from that, Reverend Richard Allen. Does that ring a bell? Oh, yeah. Reverend Richard Allen didn't have a last name growing up. He was just called the Negro Richard because he was a slave. Well, his master met a reverend who had given up his slaves because he believed that God did not agree with slavery. So eventually, Reverend Richard Allen was able to work his way out of slavery, and he started a church. He started the American Methodist Episcopal Church. That's right. And he made sure that both slaves and free men could receive Christ. And this was starting in the Second Great Awakening. We were starting to decide as a country that slavery was no good. It was the beginning of abolitionism. He was a major figure in that. John Chapman, do you guys know who that is? John Chapman. He's from Leominster, Massachusetts. He planted a lot of trees. Johnny Appleseed, yes. His real name is John Chapman. Besides planting groves throughout the heartland and nurseries and all these trees that nourish so many, apples are very good for you. He was a vegetarian. He fought against cruelty to animals. He had a mission to the Indians. He lived a very simple life. Once he was at one of these camp meetings, and there was a reverend, and Americans were getting a little prosperous, we're getting a little wealthy, and he's like kind of chastising them about that. And he says, "Where is the simple Christian, the barefoot Christian?" And then Johnny Appleseed came up, and he was barefoot, and he was like this man of the woods. And then he kind of shut that reverend up about that, because there was at least one guy like that he was preaching about. That was kind of funny. So, all right, so another one. Let me see here. Finney, Charles Finney. Does that name ring a bell? Charles Finney, another great pastor. When he came to Boston, he brought 50,000 souls to Christ in 1 week. And you know what he used to say when he bring it to Jesus? "What will you do with Jesus Christ? Now that you got Jesus, what are you going to do with it?" Yeah, we're not just supposed to be grace potatoes. You know what a couch potato is? You sit your butt on the couch and you watch TV. As Christians, we're not supposed to just sit there and say, "Wow, it's great, I got Jesus." Yes, it's great. Give them worship, but then you're supposed to go out there and do and be doers of the word and not merely hearers of the word. This guy was a doer. He founded Oberlin College, which in those days anyway is very godly. You had Christians of all races and men and women studying in a godly manner, just like we do at Camp Constitution at Oberlin College, and that was the work of Reverend Charles Finney. Important to know. Noah Webster, what did he do? Yes. Your sister. Yes.
He made the dictionary.
He wrote the dictionary. Yes, he did. What else did he do?
He wrote the American dictionary.
Yes, that's right. We were very proud. So Abigail Adams, she had an American cookbook, right? We were very proud. What did Paul Revere do? Who remembers my Paul Revere course? After the Midnight Ride. Yeah. Paul Revere went to work. Oh my goodness, what a productive American he was. He invented a process of pressing copper into sheets. He put the dome on our State House, which is gilded. It has gold leaf under it, but underneath the gold leaf, which you'll see tomorrow, is Paul Revere's copper. He also put copper underneath the USS Constitution, the ship, so it would sail faster. This was our Paul Revere. He made guns. He made cannons. One thing I don't like, when you get on the USS Constitution, they have British guns as their cannons. And I know they were fitted with American guns. We were very proud. We were manufacturing our own stuff. Very important to make stuff in America, to buy American stuff when you can, and not Chinese stuff at Walmart. It's bad for America. Yeah, and it's better quality too. And now with online shopping, you can find American stuff for a pretty good price, and you don't even have to go out and fight the traffic. Okay. That's what Paul Revere would say. Our Navy. So we had these young Navy. We just had a few ships. So the deal was we couldn't take on the British Navy with their hundreds of ships. We would just send out really fast, really well-made ships with American ingenuity. And we would take out individual ships that strayed away from the fleet. And then if we had a fleet coming at us, we would run. Yeah. Yeah, and it worked well. So, leading up to the War of 1812, what happened is you'd have these British boats like the Java, and they would come up to our boats, and if anybody sounded like he had a British accent, they would say he's one of ours, when they might have emigrated to the United States, and all of a sudden they were kidnapped and you were made into a British sailor. That's called impressment. And they would actually do this in Britain. They would do it too. They would come up in a pub, and what they would do is they would put a coin in the guy's beer mug. And if he drank all the way down to the bottom of the beer mug and he didn't see the coin, They drag them off and put them on a ship in the Navy. That's true. It's called impressment. And those were called press gangs. The press gang would come, they would put you on a ship. So they were doing that to our sailors on the high seas. The other thing they were doing was in the western part, where's our friends from Ohio and Michigan? Raise your hands. Yeah. Okay, yeah. Who's been to Fort Meigs? Raise your hand. Fort Meigs. It's in Perrysville. It's near Toledo. It's near you guys. It's a really cool fort. That's where I got that flag. And anyway, this was the age of forts, guys. This was cool. So you would like attack and then you run back and you defend the fort. So when 1812 started, we actually just gave up 2 forts without a fight. We gave up the fort at Detroit and the fort at Mackinac. Where's Gracie? Yes, Gracie, where's the Fort Mackinac? I put you in charge of Michigan geography. Yes, I did.
Oh, it's in Michigan.
She knows that. Where in Michigan? Where's Mackinac Island? It's between the 2 peninsulas. It's a very pretty island. They don't allow cars. Horse and buggy, or walking, or bicycles. There's a nice hotel. So the War of 1812 starts. The British set up a few cannon, and they say, give up the fort, and the guy just gave up the fort. Same thing happened in Detroit. These guys didn't even put up a fight. William Henry Harrison, also known as Tippecanoe, he did put up a fight at Fort Meigs. And the British, with the Indians, Tecumseh, Chief Tecumseh had been fighting for years and years. We would sign treaties, but some chiefs would agree with the treaties and stick to it. Some would say, no, that's not good. Tecumseh was one of those. And so the British had been inciting Indians to the west to attack the settlers for all that time. And when we fought the Revolutionary War, Indians fought against us. When we fought this war, Indians fought against us. French and Indian War, against us. So that some people say, which is true, the Indians kind of got a raw deal in a lot of ways in this country, but they really kind of always fought against the Americans. And interesting, when I traveled across America, I went to see Crazy Horse Monument. Does anybody know about that?
Yeah.
Yeah, you seen it?
Yeah,
it's near Mount Rushmore, so it's this huge Indian, and the head, just the head of Chief Crazy Horse is bigger than all of Mount Rushmore. Chief Crazy Horse was a vicious man. He was, when Custer had his last stand, the ones that gave up, they were kind of massacred. He wasn't well liked by his own Indians. They killed him, not us, they did. And he wasn't a Christian. I don't understand why this guy gets a monument that his head is bigger than all of Mount Rushmore. Yeah. And the thing about it is there's a whole movement now, the whole politically correct movement says, Indians, you know what? You guys were really cool with your spirituality and stuff, and just, it was the white man that gave you the Christianity, and just give that up. And so now they're all kind of going back to their spirituality, and they're getting away from Christ. And it's funny, all of us come from tribal peoples. I mean, if I look at like the Celts, the Scots, the Irish, and the Germanic tribes, before they were Christianized, they were very vicious. They had things like human sacrifice. And even the Hebrews, if you look at Jeremiah and Ezekiel, they were like sacrificing, they were getting away from God and sacrificing to Molech and things like that. So really, it's not a good thing for people to go back and be like that again. I am totally against that, but that's what the politically correct people are saying. Go back to your roots. And I say, no, stick with the Bible. You better, or else. Yeah, we'll hear more about that, I'm sure. Okay, so, yes, how are we doing? All right, good. I had a little bit of time here. Moving right along. So, they incited these Indians against us, and this Indian Tecumseh, when we had this fight at Fort Meigs, some of the really good Kentucky riflemen went out and they staged a raid, and they got captured, and then they got massacred. Even though they surrendered, they got massacred by Indians, and there's a really famous restaurant near there now, and Tecumseh was, apparently he was a little upset about this, and so now the historians say, what a noble chief. He was a little bit upset about this. You know what, if he taught his men to really be honorable soldiers and savages, they wouldn't keep doing things like this, and also to settlers. So I don't think he was a real gentleman at all, or soldier, but that's the way they tell it these days. Okay, so anybody know who Lewis and Clark were? You haven't said anything, you. Okay, don't raise your hand then. Very good. Yeah. So Louisiana was this huge, it wasn't just where the state is, it was this huge middle of the country, and they actually went all the way out to the Pacific Ocean. I kind of followed their route with Jefferson. So America was moving west, and the British were using the Indians to stop us from moving west. There were people here in Massachusetts, well, in New England, or New Hampshire now, that also didn't want us to move west, that were former Tories, and they were called the Essex Junto. They were mostly in Essex County. Our first millionaire in the country was, during this period, his name was Derby, and he was involved in shipping. He shipped to China, and he made $1 million when it'd be more like $1 billion today. And so there was a lot of money, they had a lot of influence, but if you're doing shipping, do you really want manufacturing in America? No, you want America basically to import their stuff and for you to ship that stuff, and that's what they wanted. And so they fought against new states being added. They didn't like this westward movement. They didn't like manufacturing here at all, and they started 3 secession movements, 2 of them before the War of 1812, and 1 of them during the War of 1812 for New England to split off and join with Britain again. And these were Federalists, and they would continue to trade with Britain in the night, and they would put out a blue light on the dock. They were called the Blue Light Federalists, because they were still doing a trade during the war. So, alrighty. We had 88% militias fighting then. Sometimes it was really good, sometimes not. Sometimes, like up here in New England, like I said, a lot of the governors wouldn't integrate their militias into the regular army when they were needed. So it was difficult. Mr. McGonigal over there is going to talk more about militias to you. God bless you. Okay, the Battle of Lake Erie. Who knows what that is? Yeah, I went there for the 200th anniversary. So there was one guy, he was actually a New Englander, and his name was Oliver Hazard Perry, and he was a Commodore, and he went and he supervised he knew how to build ship. He supervised the building of a Navy on Lake Erie. And so this Navy, in September of 1813, took out an entire British fleet that had never been done before in British history. And they had a saying, don't give up. Don't give up the ship. He actually had to give up his ship because his ship was destroyed by a British man of war. He moved to another ship, and from the other ship, he took out the rest of the British Navy. So he really should be don't give up, but that's a naval saying, don't give up the ship. And yeah, so he also said, we have met the enemy and they are ours. So this really was the victory that we needed, and especially against the British Navy, to take out a whole fleet. That was really, really amazing. The Constitution was just going around, like I said, on the Atlantic, just looking for one ship after another, and she came across the Java. And the Java was one of those ships that was doing impressment of our sailors. So the Java was a hated ship. The Constitution, what they would do would, the ships would sail, like they would cross the T. So here's like the enemy ship, here's the Constitution, and all her cannons are lined up like that. They cross, and they would rig it. They go boom, 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 right down the line, and the mast would come down like a forest that got chopped down. That was the end of the Java, the dreaded ship Java, and the Constitution did that to a number of ships. But when she would come across a whole fleet of ships, she was very fast. She could sail away. So, alrighty. The British were involved with fighting Napoleon, so we got to fight their B team for a while, which was good. Not their best soldiers. The best soldiers were in Europe. But in the summer of 1814, they beat Napoleon. So now, what are they going to do? That's right. They send over the A team here. You know, it's not the junior varsity anymore. It's the varsity squad, and we're in trouble. So, and that's what happened. A lot of our troops were up in the Northwest, where the Calises live and your family lives. And there were no troops. There were very few troops other than militia and poorly organized in this part of the country defending the area where Washington is. And that was a mistake. So on August 24th, 1814, the British Army, after having won at Bladensburg, was right outside of Washington. And Dolly Madison, who was the wife of James Madison, he's the father of the Constitution. So now he's president. The guy before him was Thomas Jefferson, who wrote the Declaration of Independence. So you have these two very famous patriots, now they're presidents. And Dolly had made this really nice dinner, and here comes these troops marching in. And she was very brave. She made sure that the picture of General Washington, which is in the White House now, anybody ever go to the White House?
Can't
Oh, yeah, you have to make a special, it's harder now. It shouldn't be. But there's this very famous painting of Washington by Gilbert Stuart, which she saved. She also saved a lot of our famous documents, like the Constitution, Declaration of Independence. She made sure that was taken out. Then the British show up, they walk into the White House, these soldiers, and they have themselves a very nice meal. Yep, and then you know what they did after to show their appreciation for the nice meal?
They blew it up.
They burned the White House. Yep. The White House got roasted, toasted. About 25 years ago, they repainted the White House. They took the old paint off, and you can see all the burn marks still over every single window. They're burn marks. The burn marks are still under there. When they burned that, they burned our Capitol. And but we were in the middle of the Great Awakening. So what do you think the people were doing?
Fighting.
They're probably praying very hard for a miracle. And a miracle happened. And this happened a lot during the Revolution too, in that the British soldiers on the Mall, who's been to Washington? Yeah. You know where the Mall is? It's not like a shopping mall. What's the Mall in Washington?
The mall field.
Yeah, the Mall. What is it?
It's like there's some statues and
Yeah.
memorials, but it's really
What
a
big,
open
super big
field.
statue is there? Really tall.
Washington
Monument, and at the end there's Abraham
Yeah.
Lincoln. So the soldiers are moving up and through there, and what happened in the middle of that? A storm whips up, a hurricane. Washington not known for its hurricanes, and a tornado came right down the center of the mall and wiped out, actually killed some of the troops, wiped them out. The rain helped start to put the fires out. They were not able to burn the entire city. They just basically burned our two major buildings, the Capitol and the White House. And then they abandoned Washington. It's just an amazing story. I have never heard of tornadoes ever in this region of the country, but they got a tornado right when and where they needed a tornado. It's just an amazing, people would say coincidence, but if you ask those people back then, they would say it was the hand of God. So, they wiped that out. So now the second largest city then is Baltimore after New York. Baltimore had eclipsed Boston and Philadelphia to be the second largest city. It's very important. There is a fort called what? Fort McHenry, which guards the harbor. So for the British to really take out the city, they have to get the ships all the way in there, but they can't because the fort is blocking it. So, oh, by the way, they have a lot of our guys are imprisoned on the ship. So the guys are imprisoned on the ship, and you know, there's a lawyer called Francis Scott Key, and Francis Scott Key goes to try to negotiate their release, and he's a good talker. As you know, he's a very good writer too, because he wrote the national anthem. But anyway, and his ancestor was F. Scott Fitzgerald, Francis Scott Key Fitzgerald. So he gets on the boat, and the admiral is very jovial with him, and he says, you know what, it's not going to really matter about these prisoners anyway, because, you know, we're going to take out your town, and we're going to take over America, so after we get done with you guys, who cares, right? And so he's thinking, oh my goodness. So the British fleet, what they do is they line up, they have big guns. Guns are artillery, they're not just this type of guns, on the ship, and they get out of range of the fort so they can start shelling the fort. And they have these things called, the latest are Congreve rockets. They're about that long, and who can say what color that comes out of the tail end of that rocket?
Orange, yellow,
White.
blue.
Gray.
It's in the song! Hello?
Red.
Red.
The rockets, red glare. What kind of rocket? A Congreve rocket. Congreve was the one that invented it. Okay. So the bombs were like these big cannonballs about yay big. They're very heavy, like 200 pounds. And the cannon would lob it up, and then they would explode in midair. So those were the bombs bursting in air. And who remembers our trip to New Hampshire last year? Anybody? Yeah. What do you remember? What do you really remember about that state house?
The hall flags.
The flags.
Yeah, what about the flags?
They were tattered and pretty.
They were tattered, they had a lot of bullet holes. Anybody that held those flags up, probably 10 or 15 guys died, one after the other, holding up those flags. So this flag is a symbol of our country, and it was important. So the prisoners down below decks, while they're doing this, and the kids, all the kids were awake. They were like watching. It was like a fireworks display, but it was like kind of dangerous because, you know, the windows were rattling. And who knows if this fort didn't hold, then they were going to, pretty soon, these soldiers would be in the city. Well, what were the soldiers that were down in prison? What were one thing that they wanted to know? They're like, did they say, "Are you going to let us out? What are you doing, Scott? You know, you going to get us out of here or what?" What did they really want to know?
If the flag is still there,
Why?
to know that they're still fighting.
Yeah. Can you see the flag? Can you see the flag? They kept on asking that. And so he's like watching this. They keep asking him that. And it was a smaller flag at that time. And the pole would get bombed down, and some people died going to put up a new flagpole and making sure it was up. There were some bodies at the foot of the flag in the morning. So this was a storm flag. It was about 17 feet long. And so they basically shot all of their artillery, or most of it, and they were waiting for us to give up, and they didn't give up. The fort was well made, and who knows what the wall of a fortress is called? Don't ooh if you don't know.
Stockade.
The what?
Stockade.
No. Starts with an R. Or the ramparts we watch. The ramparts are the walls of the fort. So here you have the flag in the fort, so that you're looking into the fort over the ramparts. Or is a poetic term meaning over. Or the land, over the land of the free and all the brave. Okay, so now you know a little bit about our song. When you sing that song, you're putting yourself back on that ship. And what I said earlier is, when is it okay for a patriot to give up?
Never.
Never. They did not give up. They didn't, just like those ones on the ship Niagara did not give up on Lake Erie. These did not give up. And in the morning, they flew this huge flag by Mary Pickering's Guild, which is 42 feet long and 30 feet the hoist. Huge flag. Anybody ever see that flag? It's a Smithsonian now. It's huge. It's a big flag. How many stars and stripes on it? Yes. 15 stars, and how many stripes? 15. You're very good. Okay, yeah. Somebody is retaining a little bit here. Good. Alrighty. So, now, the fort held, but still we're not doing that well. We're not winning, so that the Tories in New England get together in Hartford, and they have this thing called the Hartford Convention, and they're going to decide whether they want to like abandon the United States during this war. So they're not real patriots and go back to England. Right? Terrible. Okay? Awful. But we have people like that in America now that are tools of European powers. Just good to know that, because what generation are you? You're the heroes. We have Judases like that here in the United States. Always have, we always will. It's good to know who they are. We'll teach you who they are here in Camp Constitution. And hopefully as Christians, we try to convert some of them when they're younger, definitely to our cause. You will be able to. So, but then there was one man that didn't give up, and he had just about had it with these New England Federalists. He'd about had it with the Brits, because when he was a kid in North Carolina, about 15, the British came in, and a British soldier came in and told him to shine his boots or something, and he said no. And this soldier took a sword to his head and just put a big slash in that kid's head. Anybody know what that kid's name was? Andrew Jackson. He's on the what dollar bill? $20 bill. What's his nickname? Old
Hickory.
Old Hickory. Yeah, Old Hickory. He was walking around with lead, because back in those days, guys would fight duels with each other. Like if you said something about a guy's fiance, that's never a good idea. He was in a few duels, and the other guy didn't win, but he was walking around with the bullet in him. He's a tough guy. He went down, as our song says at campfire, he went down and he whipped them good. He took his militia soldiers, they whipped them good at New Orleans. And it's funny, this was 1815. We'd actually signed a treaty of peace in Ghent, and but still it was good that we taught them a lesson not to come over here and start anything with us, and then there was no invasions after that. But the other thing that I don't know if I said, but I'm going to say really quickly, is that Jefferson and Madison wanted to get rid of the second bank of the United States, which was a European tentacle of the Rothschilds. And the Federal Reserve is a European tentacle of the Rothschilds. They were not able to, because of this war that was stirred up by the Brits. We had a war debt, so they couldn't get rid of the bank as they want. But guess who did get rid of the bank when he became president? No. Who did I just tell you about? Andrew Jackson. He said, "You are a den of vipers." He read the Riot Act. He kicked them out. They sent an assassin. He was in the Capitol building, and both guns, the caps went off, the firing caps, but the bullets didn't fire because it gets very humid there. And he had his cane, and he was about to beat that assassin up. And the Rothschilds got him a very good lawyer, and that was the first case of temporary insanity in this country. They got him off. Can you believe that? Because they have a lot of money and power. But we did get rid of the bank then, which is really great. When he was elected, he had a big party in the White House. They had 1,000-pound cheese. Yeah, talk about the big cheese, and it smelled like cheese. That place smelled like cheese for months. And he opened up the door, and you could just come in and wish Old Hickory well. And the hard cider was flowing. They tore apart the drapes. They really kind of trashed the White House with that party. It's a very famous party in history. But he was a man of the people. And during this Great Awakening, during that time, abolitionism got started too, to get rid of slavery. So this is America and the Young Republic. And we came out with a lot of pride after that war of 1812. And hopefully when we get through this crisis with you heroes at the helm, we're going to have another. What's happened each time once we get through the crisis is America goes on to new heights and new technology, and it's way better than anybody. The crisis is way worse than anybody than I can tell you about. But once we get through it, know that we're in a cycle. We're not in a straight line going down, down, down. We will cycle out of this. It's up to you to do it. It's up for us to help you. But once we do, America will go on to greater heights. Thank you very much.